All right, hello everyone, and we have nearly finished the first bit of Dr. Dave Regis's openings repertoire book. And what have we been looking at so far? Well, we've been looking at everything that can come from this. We've seen this possibility for white. We've seen an early one of these. And this section was on the two knights variation, which was basically from this. And we've got 4 more games with this kind of thing to go. What I would say is what we should have learned by now is that basically this repertoire is based on an early d4, a reasonably early bishop c4, and an early get castled. Yeah, there's other things white can play, but against this, to the knight f3, knight c6, we're looking at this, and open up the middle of the board and try to attack the black king. And we know that black's okay if black gets it right, and white's perfectly okay if white gets it right. But we've seen some pretty unpleasant ends for both players, but especially for black when things go wrong. So we've got 4 more games to go, and then we'll be moving on to some slightly different openings. So where are we here? Let's turn the lines off. Our first game in these 4 is between somebody called Komarek and somebody called Petrosova. And we're going back to 1969. And I don't know where the tournament is because Dr. Dave's got it in some sort of, it looks like shorthand, KOLT, Colt, all in capitals. I'm not sure where that is. But anyway, let's see how the game goes. So e4, e5 has been played, knight f3, knight c6 been played, bishop to c4, and we've got our, oops, not that, knight to c6. We've got our 2 knights. And as usual with these openings, d4 is played. Takes and takes. So exactly as we said, the bishop's out early, d4 to distract this pawn out the middle and get castled. Okay, so all absolutely fine and tickety-boo just at the minute. And bishop e7 is played. Now that's obviously okay-ish. Nothing wrong with it. It's still quite balanced. Dr. Dave has put in brackets here, by the way, knight takes e4, which suggests that maybe that's black's absolute best move. But bishop e7 is played in our game, and it's okay. And white plays knight takes d4. Okay, absolutely fine. And now black plays knight takes, and things are not looking quite so good. Okay, well, we'll come back with the computer in a minute and see why, but it's still an advantage to white, but it's only plus 0.8. So what's the best move? Well, knight f5. Let's attack this and attack this. And bear in mind, if this rook comes across, you've got 2 pieces on the same line as the king. In all of these variations, we've been saying black gets into trouble when the king seems to be stuck in the middle of the board. So in this particular game, black plays g6 to attack the knight, and you can see what happens to the bar. It whizzes off to the ceiling. Knight to g7 check, which is strange because it looks like the knight's getting trapped. Look, it's got no way out that's not attacked by pawns. And yet, after king here, black has some problems because we've got a nice bishop down here, which we activate, put on the same line as the king. And what on earth are you going to do about this knight simply moving here, which would be check from the bishop, and then knight takes queen? Well, the answer is you have to move the king out of the firing line of the bishop. Okay, fine. So now what? What can white do to keep making progress? Well, here's the forcing move. Bishop takes. The king, I didn't mean to draw that arrow, excuse me. The king has to take, and now we have queen to d5 check. So we have immediately won back the piece. The king has got to go wherever the king's got to go. It's going to be f6. Okay, remember the king can't go here because we've already established this is check from the bishop, and then the king moves and knight takes queen. Be knight takes queen next move. So that's no good. So king to f6, nothing else is legal anyway. And just have a look here. That queen takes e4, and black resigns in the tournament game. Nothing wrong with that. Because look, materially white, it's all level, but look at the state of the black king here. I mean, it's just not good. Goodness me, that king is just gonna die. And at master level, yeah, you're in all sorts of trouble here as black. At a good club level, even, you're in trouble. So, ouch for our first game. Here, let's have a look at the second one. And have we got some names here? Has Dr. Dave given us some names for this one? Yes, we have. We have a white player called Spurlman and the black player Gorta. And it's the, he's done it again. It's the Netherlands under 12 championships, round 5, no less, from the year 2000. Yeah. Okay, let's have a look here. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop to c4, knight f6. So you can keep an eye on the bar. All's very well so far, no problem. d4, takes, castles. And this time, bishop to c5. Okay, so far so level. If you've been following these videos, you'll know that white's best bet seems to be to play e5, and black's best bet seems to be to put the pawn here, so to ignore the attack on the knight and instead attack the white bishop. But in this game, black decides they're not a big fan of having the knight attacked, and so plays across to h5. So we've now got a knight, oh dear, looking very, very unhappy on the side of the board with no squares to go to, because all of these squares are attacked by white pieces, and the computer giggling slightly that it's +6 after 6 moves. Okay, fine. So let's see how white finishes things off. Well, knight g5 first of all. So this is typical thematic in this opening. You've got these two pieces attacking f7. The knight is defended by the bishop. So sometimes we've seen the knight here and the bishop on g5, but in this case, it's the other way around. And so not only are we now threatening to play bishop takes pawn check, but we've unleashed an attack from the queen onto the knight. It's not very pretty. And in the actual game, black castled, queen h5. I mean, yeah, this is definitely a game between juniors, because, you know, you wouldn't get this in a real game, but it's a pretty good example. It was a real game. You wouldn't get it in a master game, I should say, but a pretty good example of what can go wrong. So we'll just put e5 on the board with the computers. As we've said before, the correct move for black is d5, which is perfectly level, but let's just have a look. Knight to h5. And it doesn't look so good. Knight g5. And even if black defends the knight, if black defends the knight, you walk into knight s7, which is forking the queen and the rook. And of course, the bishop is protecting the knight. There's just no good. So a typical example of what can happen if one side gets things wrong in these openings. Okay, we've got 2 more to go. And we haven't got player names in this one. Never mind, doesn't matter. But we do still have the 2 knights variation. So e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to c4, knight to f6. And we've got castles first this time, which is absolutely fine. And if you do play knight to e4 here, it's perfectly good for black. I always thought as a junior, you were supposed to play rook to e1, because the knight and the pawn and the rook are then all on the same line as the king. But I mean, okay, black's a pawn up, but it's not -1, so clearly white's got some compensation. But for now, that is not what happens, and we'll just turn the lines off. What happens is black plays d6. Okay, well, fine. It's a bit passive, isn't it? But it's okay. It's a solid move. Computer says slight advantage white. Knight to c3. Bishop to g4, pinning the knight to the queen. So it looks as though this can't move. White plays h3 to kick the bishop away, and bishop goes back. We're not going to play bishop takes knight. We want to keep the pin as black. At least that's what the player of the black pieces would have been thinking. And d3 from white instead of d4, which is interesting. So d3 is played, and knight to d4. So we've got a pinned piece, and not unsurprisingly, we attack it again. That's what we always do with a pinned piece. So what happens here? Well, white doesn't like this pin, so white plays g4. I mean, this is a crazy game, really. G4, pushing pawns in front of your own king, but the computer's saying you can get away with it here, so G4. And black tried a typical sacrifice. It's not really probably the right move here, but he gave it a go. G4, takes. So we've got the pin back again. Looks very dangerous. But what happens? Well, you can ignore the fact that it's pinned. And this is a variation of something. I think it's Legal's mate. This is called Legall. I'm sure it's the Legal mate. So, okay, if you take the queen, oops, I'm drawing arrows that I don't need to. If you take the queen, you run into this. Check, supported by the knight. King has to go here and checkmate in the middle of the board. This is protected by this knight. This is guarded by the bishop. This is protected by this knight. And this is guarded by the bishop. You can't take the bishop because of the knight. Dead. Checkmate in the middle of the board. Ouchie. Now, just to go back again, because I always want to say it's really, really important that people realize that this is perfectly okay. Black can play knight takes here. It's fine. Yeah, white gets some compensation for their pawn. But it's fine. It's doable. And you can see that minus not very much. It's basically level. But that's not what happens in our game. We get d6. Knight to c3. It's still pretty level. Bishop to g4. It's still okay. You'd expect this for white from a normal opening. Here we go. Here we go. It's all okay. Here, all okay. And g4. Wow. What black should play is knight takes. And then after queen takes, slight advantage white. But that's not what we get in the game. And I just want to show you the Legal mate one more time because it's really quite cool. So we actually get this sacrifice, this here, knight takes. And the best move for black is to actually play pawn takes knight, is not to take the queen. So pawn takes knight and then queen takes bishop. And it's still advantage white. But bishop takes pawn, king moves, knight there, checkmate. Definitely worth remembering this one in the middle of the board, and the king's blocked in by his own pawn. Ouch. Okay. So we have one more game left to go on this particular topic. And we are back with the two knights. So e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to c4, knight to f6, and d4. Okay, takes and castles. So we've seen this now several times. Now this time, knight to e4. Okay, well, why not? Rook to e1. Remember what we said. It's all pointing at this king. Well, this is okay. Black is perfectly alive here. He's just got to be very, very careful. And d5. So annoying the white bishop and defending the knight in the middle of the board. But bishop takes. What? Well, how's that okay? Okay, we've seen a similar tactic to this. So if queen here, which is what was actually played in the game, we then have this beauty. Knight to c3. What? Well, pawn takes is no good because queen takes queen. So you can't just take the knight. You can't play knight takes. It's not going to let me because the knight is actually pinned. And we're attacking the queen. So the queen's got to move. And when the queen moves, we'll actually be able to then take the knight back. So we haven't lost a piece. So in the game that queen to a5 was played, knight takes e4 is played. So now white is threatening all sorts of nasty things by just moving the knight somewhere. One of these will be a good move, no doubt, and opening up the attack from the rook. So black has to do something. So black plays bishop to e6, which puts a blocker in the way of the rook. Okay, so a pretty standard position, not as complicated as it sounded, but it's basically about level. The white tries something a little unusual, and white tries knight here. Ah, okay. Well, why is the excuse me? Why is the bar just dropped that low? Well, you're not actually able to take the knight back. Watch. So knight takes, and you've lost a piece. Why have you lost a piece? Well, queen takes, and queen takes here is actually checkmate. So, wow, yeah, a nice little example of how white can get themselves into some trouble as well in these openings. But we'll just go back to here and put on show lines. So in this position, it's a perfectly standard position. That is absolutely fine. But what you can't do is this. It simply loses a whole piece. What should white be doing in this situation? Well, various things. The computer's saying knight here to attack the bishop, which makes sense. What do we do with a pinned piece? We attack it, and then black can castle out the way, and on goes the game in a reasonably level position. So white will get their pawn back, knight takes, that pawn takes back, rook takes, and both sides have got 6 pawns and a bishop and a knight. So, okay, it could have been fine. All right, so that's basically about it from Dr. Dave on this particular opening. So we've seen in the first few videos quite a lot of stuff coming from this. We've seen d4 played early. We've seen bishop c4. We've seen bishop c5 and c3. But the whole repertoire is based around, after this and this, after knight f3, knight c6, is based around a really early d4, an early bishop c4, and getting castled. That's Dr. Dave's recommendation for that. But if we go back one, just get rid of the lines here, black doesn't have to play knight to c6 here. There are other options. And so the next few videos, when I get around to doing it, will be on some different options for black. And so I'm having a quick look at the chapters page here. What are we likely to have? I would guess we're going to have the Petrov Defense. Yeah, exactly as we thought. So we're going to look at this one, known as the Petrov Defense, which is very, very solid for black indeed. Lots of grandmasters like that one. We're going to look at the Elephant Gambit, which is not at all good really for black. If white knows what they're doing, they'll be better here, but it is dangerous. You know, I can't completely dismiss it. It is dangerous. The Latvian Gambit, which comes under the same kind of bracket as the elephant, really. If white knows what they're doing, they'll be fine. But if they're not careful, they can get into some trouble. So we'll see that one. And then probably most solid. Oh, no, that's not fair on the Petrov. The Petrov's very, very good. But Philizdor's Defense, which is very solid and just defends the pawn with the pawn. Instead of putting the knight out, it defends the pawn with the pawn. So that is all coming up. But for now, we have basically got to the end of the first big chapter in Dr. Dave's book. So thank you for watching that, and I'll be back soon with the next section, which is on the Petrov Defense. Okay, see you all soon. Thank you.